Independent Jewish homeland was to be created in the land of Israel.
Prepared this land for homeland for the Jews, but they betrayed us.
As in 1920, the cry went up, the government is with us, killed the Jews.
I was struck by the poverty of honor that existed in just so much of the world.
It was an appointment that would later come back to haunt the British.
Criminals led nations into war and turned simple people into monstrous tools of destruction. The promised homeland in Israel could have accepted the Jews of Europe, but Great Britain reneged on their forsaken promise. Shalom, my name is Randy Weiss, and this is CrossTalk. We're investigating a tragic time in human history. The Holocaust erupted during the Nazi effort to wipe the Jews from the face of the earth. As a lover of Israel and a student of history, we know that millions of lives could have been saved if the Jewish nation of Israel had been established sooner. England's Balfour Declaration of 1917 guaranteed that a Jewish state would be brought into existence. But decades passed before the Jews had a homeland, and this is the story of that forsaken promise. CrossTalk International, in partnership with the Hatikva Film Trust, is bringing this story to television. Copies of the DVD of this television series and the individual film DVDs are available at our website. And now, we turn to 1938 to continue our study of the forsaken promise.
By late 1938, it was becoming apparent to the British government in London that war with Germany was a strong possibility, despite the pact that Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain had made with Hitler. The Jewish question and Palestine, as they saw it, was becoming increasingly problematic. In November 1938, the Cabinet Committee on Palestine held a meeting which would result in the government's eventual reneging on the Balfour Declaration. Among those present was the Colonial Secretary, Malcolm MacDonald. Lord Halifax, the Foreign Secretary, warned the Cabinet Committee that the government would have to choose between its commitments to the world of Jewry and the world of Islam. The committee decided it could not afford to antagonize the Muslim world, which was demanding a total cessation of Jewish immigration into Palestine. The result was a compromise between the Foreign Office and the Colonial Office, the MacDonald White Paper of May 1939. The White Paper restricted Jewish immigration into Palestine to a total of 75,000 over the next 5 years, allowing for 25,000 immediate entries with a further 10,000 per year over the 5-year period. After that, any further immigration was to be subject to the agreement of the Arabs. In addition, the White Paper foresaw the establishment of an independent state with a 2/3 Arab majority. Around the world, Jewish opposition to the White Paper was immediate and intense. Chaim Weizmann wasted no time in addressing their grievance to the Permanent Mandates Commission of the League of Nations. In the British Parliament, a stormy debate raged. Among the fiercest opponents of the Conservative government's new policy on Palestine was Winston Churchill, who tore into the White Paper.
After the period of 5 years, no further immigration will be permitted unless the Arabs of Palestine are prepared to acquiesce to it. Now there is the breach. There is the violation of the pledge. There is the abandonment of the Balfour Declaration. There is the end of the vision, of the hope, of the dream.
The Permanent Mandates Commission of the League of Nations accused Britain of a flagrant breach of the mandate and called attention to her virtual suspension of Jewish immigration. But of course, Firstly, this was on the outbreak of war, and the League of Nations Mandates Commission was dying. And secondly, perhaps more important, it had no teeth. It could protest. That was all.
Though Britain showed mercy and opened her doors to 10,000 young Jews, the MacDonald White Paper of 1939 would seal the fate of European Jewry. It effectively blocked their escape route from the impending Holocaust. For the hundreds of thousands of Jews trying to escape the inferno they knew was descending upon them, there was nothing to lose but to try to reach the historic Jewish homeland in what was then known as Palestine in any way possible. The Jewish Agency in Palestine, together with the underground organizations, had little option but to bring home the Jews in a clandestine operation called Ha'apala.
The clandestine Ha'apala or clandestine immigration toward Israel, it started July 1934, the first Ma'apilim ship, Velos. It ended on May 1948 with the declaration of Israel. We had the Ha'apala mainly by sea, and we had a few by air, and a couple of thousand who came by land. The whole Ha'apala together is about 130,000 Ma'apilim.
The illegal immigrants, as the British referred to them, had one major obstacle: the Royal Navy.
So there were about 60 ships before the war, small ships. Most of them were intercepted by the Navy.
ואנשים שניסו להגיע באופן בלתי לגלי ובפחותות האחרונים, אז לא פעם כשנתפסו והוחזרו, התאבדו, שלא היה להם שום טעם בחיים.
I want to make sure that everyone understands what was just expressed. England, not Germany, became the immediate enemy of the Jews who were escaping to our promised homeland. Shiploads of terrified Jewish emigrants were fleeing to safety in Israel. It was not German U-boats that stopped my people from making it to the shores of a safe haven. It was the British Navy that patrolled the waters around Israel and refused entry to Jewish refugees. In a moment, more of the forsaken promise.
Without any consideration, without any feeling. And so it went all over the city. They attacked all the Jewish homes, and as I said, with a cruelty unbelievable.
The British betrayed us.
The British authorities responded by ethnically cleansing Hebron of its Jewish population. The Jews had been stripped of their civil rights and declared as a subhuman race.
Millions perished because of the world's inaction. No nation on earth would welcome the Jews. The promised homeland in Israel could have accepted the Jews of Europe, but Great Britain reneged on their forsaken promise.
And I will bless those that bless you, and curse those that curse you.
If you're like me, you've probably heard that scripture since you were young. But one might ask, what does this really look like? Well, there are two ways that you can bless Israel in a very tangible way. One of those ways is to go. The other way is to plant trees. You see, Israel is a modern miracle in the desert of the Middle East because believers like us plant trees. So I'll ask, do you want to bless Israel? For every $25 contribution that you make, we're going to plant a tree in your name, and we'll send you a certificate that you can hang on the wall and display proudly that you're standing with and you have blessed Israel. So give me a call at 1-800-688-3422 or visit us on the web at crosstalk.org. Let us know how many trees you want to plant. And if you're able, Join us on our next tour of the Holy Land and plant one with your own hands.
How much could a people be made to endure? As we learned from the translation of Professor Shalom Lindenbaum's testimony, some of the refugees could not bear the fear, disappointment, and disgust of being captured by the British so close to the promise of freedom in the Jewish homeland. Some actually committed suicide. They had escaped the certain death of Nazi concentration camps, only to be arrested by British troops who refused to grant them entry into the land they'd been promised. War can obviously bring out the worst in people and nations. War makes some men heroes and makes others villains or worse. It makes them victims of the forsaken promise.
The war started, Second World War, so the most pressing thing was to bring the Jews.
I believe that if the gates were open, as they should be, as the Declaration of Balfour, if it would have really been the national house for Jews, very many Jews would have survived and were live today with us here in Israel or any other place. But it's not only the locked gates of Israel, the influence of England at the time over other countries was strong enough for not permit immigrants, Jewish immigrants, to enter into their countries.
The diplomatic pressure on countries like Italy, Greece, Romania, Turkey was enormous. Yugoslavia was enormous. And the British ambassador, 50% of activities in those countries were on this subject for illegal immigration. But they couldn't stop us because the need was such. There was no other option.
With the outbreak of war, the Jewish battle for survival off the shores of their promised land became more desperate. The British government wanted to send a clear signal to the Jews of Europe. The gates of Palestine were closed. However, instead of returning the Jews to a certain death in Europe, Britain interned them. The year before the war began, the British had built a detention camp on the coast at Atlit. For the final 10 years of the mandate, it served as the main detention camp for Jews on the soil of Eretz Israel. The less fortunate were deported and imprisoned elsewhere. One family among the many thousands was the Groner family.
It was on the 3rd of September 1940. I left Bratislava to go to Israel.
Annie escaped down the river Danube with her husband Paul to the Black Sea. From Constanza, they sailed on the Atlantic with more than 1,800 other Jewish refugees crammed on board.
And near Cyprus, the British Navy take us to Israel because we are Jew and take us to a prison. First to Atlit and after 8 days to Mauritius.
The Atlantic arrived in Haifa, escorted by the Royal Navy in November 1940. All the refugees were interned in Atlit. The British authorities were determined to make an example of them and deport them. Among them, Annie Groner and her husband.
The British police was drinking the whole night. They are drinking, and they was so full of drink. In the morning, they give us with sticks. We are without clothes, only with blankets. They bring us to the ship.
Nearly 1,600 Jewish refugees who had escaped from Nazi-occupied Europe were taken to Mauritius. The men were imprisoned in the squalid conditions of the Beau-Bassin prison. The women and children were interned in a nearby prison camp.
In one barrack, 20 or 30 women together. In barracks like here, you know what is 30 women together the whole time, and the husband in the prison.
The men and women were segregated, even husbands and wives. 1 in 10 of the refugees sent to Mauritius finished up in the cemetery on the island. Conditions were harsh, food scarce, and diseases such as typhoid took their toll. Annie herself spent much of her time in hospital. Today, as a widow, she still bears the emotional scars of losing her family in the Holocaust and Britain's harsh treatment of her and her people.
You know, I can't understand after the so many troubles why they are doing it. For what? For what we must pay such a, you know, they stole me 5 years of my life. 5 years of, I was 20 years old. Can't understand.
The white paper with 15,000 a year, 75,000 in 5 years. Even this was not used when Hitler was slaughtering millions. At the end of the war, there were 36,000 certificates not used.
It was an appeasement, a political appeasement, and paid with the blood of the Jews.
Hitler had planned the final solution. World leaders knew what the outcome would be for the Jewish people. What could have possibly caused honorable men in free nations to do such dishonorable things that led to the further destruction and depreciation of Jewish lives? Please stay tuned for the conclusion of our series about the Forsaken Promise.
Without any consideration, without any feeling. And so it went all over the city. They attacked all the Jewish homes, and as I said, with a cruelty unbelievable.
The British betrayed us.
The British authorities responded by ethnically cleansing Hebron of its Jewish population. The Jews had been stripped of their civil rights and declared as a subhuman race.
Millions perished because of the world's inaction. No nation on earth would welcome the Jews. The promised homeland in Israel could have accepted the Jews of Europe, but Great Britain reneged on their forsaken promise.
I am Regent's first ROTC graduate student.
More dynamic last time. Jagged. This one is what? You're out. That's what you're doing, college. You're experimenting with food. Too late for it.
As we come to the end of the film, I'm struck by the poverty of honor that existed in just so much of the world. Politicians proved themselves to be of weak character. Criminals led nations into war and turned simple people into monstrous tools of destruction. Before we conclude this series, please consider the following images and facts about some of the stories we have studied in this brief survey into the Forsaken Promise.
The British entered Jerusalem in 1917, and right from the start it was obvious, both to the Arabs and the Jews, that the British administration was anti-Zionist and strongly against the return of the Jews. And from that time on, there wasn't either a military governor or later on, apart from Sir Herbert Samuel, there wasn't even a civil governor who wasn't tainted with anti-Semitism.
They certainly were on the Arab side, because otherwise they would have come much earlier. And my father and all the delegation went and asked for protection, but it didn't help. And the result was very tragic.
The British betrayed us. The mandate was given to the British to prepare this land for a homeland for the Jews, but they betrayed us.
By 1939, the Arab interest had become paramount, and the Jewish interest was very residual in effect. It's a complete retreat from the mandate.
Because we are Jew and we cannot be stay in Israel, so they send us to the prison. My life, 5 years of my life, I was in prison in Mauritius because I was a Jew.
It's a dark, dark stand on the British authorities. Even the Arabs would want go mad if few ships will arrive at night and unload people.
בניית יהודים מלברוח מאירופה להגיע לכאן, וגם לא קיבלו אותם לא באנגליה וגם לא בארצות הברית. זה היה ממש שיתוף פעולה עם היטלר.
I believe that if the gates were open as they should be, as the Declaration of Balfour, if it would have really been the national house for Jews, very many Jews would have survived.
It was an appeasement, a political appeasement, and paid with the blood of the Jews.
My whole family is going to Gaza. We came here, the time we were there, we didn't know. Only we came here to Israel. They tell us that nobody is alive.
Britain survived victoriously 2 world wars, retained one of the largest empires in history, but had a negative attitude towards Israel and lost everything for no obvious reason, except that God's word went into effect. So I fear for my British people that we'll bring a lot of trouble on ourselves if we don't change our attitude toward Israel.
I hope this has opened your eyes to the results of the Forsaken Promise. Yes, we are out of time, but let me remind you that this project is only possible through the kindness of the Hatikva Film Trust. DVDs of this entire series, along with the film itself, The Forsaken Promise, are available through our website, www.crosstalk.org. or by calling the number on the screen. I am personally grateful to my friends at the Hatikva Film Trust for allowing me to share this wonderful project and other upcoming series with our audiences. It is on their behalf that I must ask you to try something that you may not be accustomed to as we close. Please study the credits. Consider those who participated in this effort. Pray for the fruitfulness of this project and for those who made it possible. Remember those who perished because of human weakness, political appeasement, and the failure of governments to do what is righteous. And as you consider these truths, pray for our government. Like many who have gone before us, our leaders are capable of making terrible decisions that lead to needless suffering. On the other hand, godly leaders are a blessing and create an opportunity for the people of God to pursue and enjoy His blessings. And then above all, pray for the peace of Jerusalem. They shall prosper that love Thee.
Because He loves me, I will follow Him. Because He loves me, because He loves me, because He loves me, I will follow Him. Because He loves me.